I like to say these fish are small relative to this spot. This is smallish. I think by most standards it would be considered a decent sized fish.
That's a big brown bro.
Okay, we have done it again, taken our side-by-side out in the middle of nowhere. And this is a lake that's known to have some chunky, portly brook trout. So as you'll see in one of the previous, or maybe the next video, a little bit behind the scenes of what we do to get here in kind of lengths. This is another one of those. We've studied it for a few years, been here a few times, so this isn't the first time we fished it. It is difficult to fish. So I don't know if we're going to catch some fish. You're going to have to watch to the end, but if we do, at the end I'll go through which ones we've worked, the flies that have worked, and how we've rigged them, and we'll set you up from there. All right. I'm trying to sight in some fish. This is a little bit of a drop off of a weed bed. Right now I'm using my floating line because I'm going to put an indicator on. I know, shocker. But there's also fish that will hang out under these little moss beds. So I'm just going to give this a little action. All right, the Leechy surprise attack did not result in any fish, but I don't know if you can see that there. There's a little calabatus on the water. I've seen a few risers, so I'm gonna go dry dropper for a bit. Most of these fish tend to hold deeper under cover, but these ones that have been rising are not. So speak of the devil, rise right over there. These fish are eating something, and very likely it's a decent brookie. So, I don't know, here goes nothing. Oh, and I should mention, one of my favorite stillwater dry fly rods is the new Orvis Blackout in a 9.5 foot 5 weight. And got my dry fly, which is a bionic ant, and a little bucktooth calabatus. It's a kind of a calabatus emerger pattern. The old dry dropper. You may remember my net hack from other videos. Oh, hello. He's pretty. Pretty chunky. Okay, been switching off. Leeches were not working. I went to, after that dry dropper the last time, went back to Leech Chironomid combo, and still not much. The fish were just not moving. I saw some fish in shallower, and I tied on a dry dropper. And this is the result. Not too shabby, a little slabby. Small guy. Not even worth the effort. All right, I am going to switch droppers. I have, the last little bit, been using a Callibaetis nymph. And again, any of these flies, if you want to know what they are, I'm going to go over them all in detail and how we fish them at the end with some pictures. It's really hard to do that here, so wait for that at the end. But I'm going to switch back to a Chironomid Pupa. The Callibaetis, even though they're flying around, I don't know if the fish are super keen on them, so we'll switch back. Still doing dry dropper, mostly because in the shallower ones where I can see the fish come in and cruise in and out, they're pretty skittish. Spencer over here is fishing a little deeper with an indicator, and again, we'll go over the flies at the end of the video. Yeah, maybe the Chironomid was the ticket. Oh, Spence? Nope. I thought we'd have a double. What if it's not the bottom and it's a huge brookie? And I like to say these fish are small relative to this spot. This is smallish. I think by most standards it would be considered a decent sized fish. Little chunky monkey. Get in here. Oh. Hello. Hey, settle down. That's a chunky guy. I think we have a blooper here. What's the rule with getting out of your float tube with fins on?
It was really hot, so I wanted to take a swim.
Oh yeah. I hear you.
I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna leave my fins on.
How is the water? Oh, I see. Was that on my dry? Throwing dry flies out here. Oh, switched over to a double Chironomid rig. Just freaking tanked this fish. He's pulling, man, just crawling it along the bottom. He's got a buddy out there watching him. Oh no, he went down to try to get some lechuga. Well, I better back out of our honey hole here. Get him over this way. Yeah, we got a lot of moss. Come on, bud. Get it in there. Now, I've got pretty heavy tippet, but dang, he is going crazy. There we go. Get him off that. That could be fish of the day. Yep, definitely. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that little guy. Okay, we will get this guy loose, but definitely fish of the day. I'll go through the flies. You'll definitely want to wait till the very end to see what fly this guy took. It was a little chironomid, so that's cool. All right, so in this video, there was a different progression with the flies than you may have seen, because it did take me a little bit of time to get them dialed in. So I started with an indicator, and on the indicator I had a leech. This is a balanced leech. We have several different sizes, and the flies that I'm going to talk about today will have links in the description below. But I think more than anything, it's more of the style of the pattern that I was using and what the fish were feeding on at a given point in time during the day. So I did start out with the indicator rig, which uses a slip indicator, and then I dropped down. This is a floating line, dropped down however deep I thought the fish were at that point, kind of gauging the depth. And then I dropped a leech down. I tried chironomids for a bit. The indicator rig wasn't working great, as I didn't know at the time, but I kind of had guessed. I ended up realizing the fish were cruising more and kind of feeding in a smaller area, so they weren't necessarily wanting something just stationary right in front of their face. So the indicator rig didn't do great, but when I switched to the Midge Tip, now this is the newer Midge Tip from Rio. This is the hover version, so it has 6 feet of a 1 inch per second sink tip. The rest is a floating line. What that allows you to do is cast out, and you can use the flies to kind of take the line or the depth of where you're fishing up or down. And what I did on that one is I started off with a chironomid and then a damsel. And so I've got an example of a damsel here, which is the belly flop balanced damsel. That coloration is great. It's a great pattern to have as a damsel. But what I found is that this version here with the bead head sunk a little too quickly. And luckily, for a little bit during the day, I was able to see where the fish were, and so I could gauge that my flies were sinking a little quicker than I wanted them to do, and they would quicker than normal get beneath the fish. So what I needed to do is I needed to swap out for flies that didn't sink as quickly, so that I could keep the flies in the zone of where the fish were a lot more consistently. So what that meant was I took a bead head damsel off, and I would switch it for a weightless damsel. And again, we have plenty of those listed on the website. And then on the point, after a while, actually as a dropper, I had a chironomid. So the setup here was the Midge Tip line, hover version, long, 6 foot tip. Now you could use a hover line, or you could use a clear camo intermediate line. The challenge with those is that, especially in a situation like this, and this is a great example of why a Midge Tip line works better than a traditional full sink, is because I was casting into some fish that were kind of varying their depths but not very deep, and they did not want the food to be moving up or down or just hanging. They wanted it to be moving really horizontally or with a slight dip. So I ended up doing the best with a combination of some weighted and unweighted chironomids, smaller sizes, 14s. This particular lake, the chironomids are not huge. So I used Lance's Chironomid Frenchie, Silver Lancer, that caught a number of fish for me. I used my Pert-Near Pupa unweighted, so that's a little pupa pattern. We don't sell that one, but we do have a tutorial for it if you want to tie it. And then I also used the Oil Slick Buzzer unweighted. Now that one's shinier, I fished that higher in the water column, so that was on my top dropper. And then I also used a Scud. There were a couple times in there where the fish did not want even a slow fish chironomid or slow retrieved, so I would use the Scud. And the Scud wasn't like, none of the flies were stupendous, but there were different times of the day where the fish were concentrating on something else. So I ended up switching off a lot. The key in this scenario, and this is probably the biggest takeaway besides the flies, is that if I cast out, even if I just had an intermediate line, if I started stripping that immediately, it would be moving too quickly and the fish did not have much of an interest in it. If I let it sink too quickly, or if I had the weighted flies on and it sunk too quickly, it's beneath the fish, they're not going to eat it anyways. So the key here was to slow it all really down, go 3 weightless flies, or maybe one. I think I had one Chironomid Frenchie with the small bead on, and I would cast it out and I would let it kind of gauge. The fish were about 4 to 5 feet down, so I would just kind of time that out and count it out, and then, so let's say 30 seconds, then I would give it a slight tug. And then I'd wait again and a slight tug. So this was not a stripping motion, wasn't a quick retrieve, but once I slowed that down, let the flies get into the zone where the fish were and started pulling it this way, more horizontally, that was the ticket. So combine that with these flies. These are your kind of standard chironomid, damsels, leeches, scuds are great stillwater flies. Anyway, all the links for these are going to be down below. Give them a try. We do have tutorials for some of them, which will be listed below as well. Otherwise, you can just buy these flies on our website, as well as the lines link below. Check us out at flyfishfood.com.